Hello, Ryan. How's it going? That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. I had to watch your video of the story of the dog and the dragon a couple times. In fact, I even went and got uh, found a Reddit post where it was written out. That way I could follow along, um, because there's so much to the story. And yeah, throughout the story, I just couldn't help but think of that quote that's often attributed to Einstein. Everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, then it will live its entire life believing it is stupid. The story that you shared clearly has a moral to it, but um I don't I don't want to spend a lot of time in like reflection to your response to your reflection questions. Um but I'll say a few things. Comparison kills contribution. Comparison kills contribution. That's a Ken Coleman quote. Um, but to some degree, there's like two different types of comparison. And I'd say like one is like good and the other is bad, kind of. So like if you're building wood furniture or something, and then you make a cut, and then you realize, oh, it's the wrong length or something. You put it up against a ruler, and you realize, shoot, it is the wrong length. Well, what you just did when you put it up against a ruler is you made a comparison. You compared the cut that you made to some sort of objective standard that you wanted it to meet. That's a comparison, but it's kind of like a good type of comparison, if you will. Does that make sense? Yeah. But then there's also like a bad type of a comparison where we're like comparing ourselves to things that are just completely unrealistic. Um, yeah, like I think that we should be able to compare ourselves to some sort of set standards that are fair, realistic, you know, combination of moral, religious, ethical, virtuous standards, things like that. But blindly comparing ourselves to like these unrealistic expectations and thinking that's what we should be able to attain, it just never works. I mean, look at the dog, right? He had no idea that what he was hoping to accomplish was just completely unrealistic. So that would be like the unhealthy type of comparison. So there's like healthy, unhealthy, constructive, deconstructive. Which one are you utilizing? Something to think about. Okay, on to my piece today. So we have now done our first complete round, if you will, of speeches and letters. Uh, Speeches and stories, lyrics and letters. Dang it. I think that's the first time I got it wrong. Speeches and stories, lyrics and letters. Um, so I did a speech, you did a letter, and then I did a lyric, and then you did a story. So now we're on to the second round, in which I'm going to start with a letter. And then maybe I'll do a story and you'll do a lyric and a speech or something, which I'm really looking forward to when you do a lyric, because typically that would be like a song lyric, maybe it could be a poem or something. And I feel like, you being the musician, whatever you pick will be pretty good. So anyway, today I am doing a letter. This is a fictional letter from the fantasy series. You may have heard of it, Harry Potter. Um, Spoiler warning to anyone who has not read the seventh Harry Potter book or seen the movie. It doesn't really come into effect in the movie at all, I don't think, but it does definitely plays a huge role in the book. Um, so yeah, this is Dumbledore's letter to Grindelwald. Now, before I share the letter, though, I want to talk about what's going on in the story so we can kind of understand all of that. Like, who, if someone doesn't care about Harry Potter but still wants to know, it's like, well, who's Dumbledore? Who's Harry? Who's Hermione? Who's Grindelwald? All these things. And I obviously can't just tell the whole story, but I'll do my best. Okay. So, we need to understand what's going on in the story. Here we are in the seventh book, The Deathly Hallows. Dumbledore died in the previous book, he's already dead, and left Harry with only a couple of clues to help him on his quest to defeat Voldemort, the most evil and dark wizard of all time. Ron and Harry, Ron is Harry's best friend, had a fight which ended with Ron leaving, so now it was Harry with only Hermione. And during this journey, Harry has also been learning that Dumbledore may not have been the man he thought he was. They decided to visit Godric's Hollow, which is a village that Harry lived in when Voldemort attacked and killed his parents. They believe a clue might be there for some reason. So they go to Godric's Hollow, which turns out to be like a sort of trap, and Harry's wand ends up breaking during the altercation, but they do get away, and before they get away, Hermione gets a copy of a newly released biography of Dumbledore's life called The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore by Rita Skeeter. Hermione starts digging through it a bit and finds something interesting. Dumbledore himself had lived in Godric's Hollow, and he lived there when he was younger, and he had quite the story to tell of those years when he was younger with his two events that transpired between him and his two younger siblings, Aberforth and Ariana. Coffee's good. Now, growing up, it is said that Dumbledore claimed to be friendly, claimed to be friendly with muggles, which are non-magic folk. So these are wizards. Muggles are non-magic folk. I'm not sure that he really was that friendly, because Dumbledore was in the position that he was in a lot of ways because of muggles. So Dumbledore's younger sister Ariana even though she was born to two wizards, she didn't really display that much magical ability, except when she lost control, out of frustration, lost her temper, and all of a sudden her magic would just explode and she couldn't really control it. Like bad things would happen. So for the most part, they just kept her inside the house locked up. But one day she was outside and their neighbors, some muggle boys, some muggle teenagers, began to tease her in their, you could say that they were even tormenting her. Ariana and Dumbledore's father saw what was going on and did not like it. And he took matters into his own hands. He killed the Muggle boys. He confessed to it and was imprisoned. So Dumbledore was pretty young when this happened. And Dumbledore spent his teenage years with a father who was in prison. The family then moved to Godric's Hollow. Dumbledore went on to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and did a very good job. He won many awards and many accolades. And he had plans to go abroad, travel abroad with some of his friends, namely Elphias Doge. And so they went to their senior last year of Hogwarts. They were about to graduate. And then after they graduated, they're like, all right, it's time to go. We're going to go to Greece first, I believe is what they wanted to do. But alas, they could not. Tragedy struck. Dumbledore's mother died. As the oldest, Dumbledore knew that it was his responsibility to go home and care for his two younger siblings, Aberforth and Ariana. But he resented it. So again, if his father wasn't in prison, he wouldn't have this responsibility. But that summer at Godric's Hollow actually turned out to be one of his favorite summers ever in the moment, but then later he looked back on it with deep regret. That summer is when he met Gellert Grindelwald. So he finishes Hogwarts, goes back to Godric's Hollow, and his neighbor has a great nephew who was just recently kicked out of the Durmstrang Institute, which is a different magic school for wizards way up in the north. He was kicked out because of his experimentation with the dark arts. Now, long story short, Grindelwald goes on to become one of the most evil dark wizards of all time, only being surpassed by Voldemort himself. But when Dumbledore met him, they were both, 17, 18 years old. They're pretty young. He just knew two things about Gellert. Well, many things, but he could tell that he was very smart, very intelligent. They were both very powerful, very capable. But Gellert was power hungry and he hated muggles. And that is why they got along so well, is that they both kind of Dumbledore hated muggles because of the position that it put him in. Gellert just hated them because he saw them as less than, so to speak. So, yeah. They became very good friends very quickly. They spent all day in discussion, intelligent, philosophical discussion. And over time they decided that they were going to rule the world because they were brilliant and powerful and they deserved it. And they would talk all day. And even at night, after they would say goodnight to each other, go to their respective homes. But then if an idea struck one of them, they'd write a letter and give it to an owl. And then owl would fly, just a couple houses down and hand the letter over. So let's take a look at the letter that's in the book here. This is Dumbledore's letter to Gellert Grindelwald. Gellert, your point about wizard dominance being for the muggles' own good, this, I think, is the crucial point. Yes, we have been given power, and yes, that power gives us the right to rule, but it also gives us responsibilities over the ruled. We must stress this point. It will be the foundation stone upon which we build. Where we are opposed, as we surely will be, this must be the basis for all our counter-arguments. We seize control for the greater good. And from this, it follows that where we meet resistance, we must use only the force that is necessary and no more. This was your mistake at Durmstrang, but I do not complain, because if you had not been expelled, we would never have met. Albus. I'm going to read it one more time because it's just so important. Gellert, your point about wizard dominance being for the muggles' own good, this, I think, is the crucial point. Yes, we have been given power, and yes, that power gives us the right to rule, but it also gives us responsibilities over the ruled. We must stress this point. It will be the foundation stone upon which we build. Where we are opposed, as we surely will be, this must be the basis for all our counter-arguments. We seize control for the greater good, and from this, it follows that where we meet resistance, we must use only the force that is necessary and no more. This was your mistake at Durmstrang, but I do not complain, because if you had not been expelled, we would never have met. Albus. Now, later in the summer, they got into an argument right before Dumbledore and Grindelwald were about to leave, or anyway, Aberforth, Dumbledore's younger brother, Dumbledore and Gellert start getting into a heated argument, and out of nowhere, they started dueling. Ariana, the younger sister, tried to interfere, and no one knows who sent the last spell, but it ended up killing Ariana. They don't know who did it. Aberforth, Dumbledore, or Grindelwald. But Ariana was dead as a result, and this was their falling out. Gellert went on to attempt a complete world domination. And he used this phrase to persuade his followers for the greater good. It's for their own sake. For Muggles' own sake, we ought to rule over them. We are smarter. We are more powerful. We ought to rule over them. It's for their own safety. And for that matter, you can even extend that to think, well, if it's for the Muggles' own good, it's because they're less powerful than wizards. So really, it's just anybody who's less powerful than Grindelwald who should be under his rule for their own sake. Now, he was clearly a tyrant in the making. He thought himself above the others and should therefore be in charge of everyone. It was for their own sake, after all. Well, oddly enough, I think this line of thinking fits a lot of us. Now, maybe we aren't tyrants and criminals, definitely aren't dabbling in the dark arts of magic. But how often do we talk about bad decisions that other people make and think, for their own sake, they should have just listened to me in the first place? We don't realize it, but as we engage in this line of thinking, we are putting ourselves above them. And then when we do it on a grander scale, making comments on like a large group of people, we are making judgments over the entire human race. We become a judge, but not just a judge, we become a self-appointed judge over the human race. We make grand assumptions, stereotypes, and just general statements. And without realizing it, we are putting ourselves on a pedestal above everybody else. For their sake, right? But what about for yours? What about for our own sake? Grindelwald's extreme statements are inhumane, unethical, dangerous, and, in the end, evil. We, like I said before, we're probably not as evil as he is. But we need to make sure that we don't fall victim to the same line of thinking. Let's just not. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's all I have for now. See you next time on Speeches and Stories, Lyrics, and Letters.
Music for this podcast is provided by Kevin MacLeod, new hero in town.